Welcome to another podcast session. In our session today, I would like to talk about the inner dialogue or conversation we have with ourselves and the key role it plays in our life, especially our mental health. This is a continuation of the earlier episodes on the same topic, that's our inner dialogue, and this is the fourth in the series. In the past 3 episodes, we understood the various ways or the categories of inner chatter. The parts of brain, our memory brain and our emotional brain, deeply into our limbic system and their involvement and impact on our mind and body through the inner chatter. We also understood the impact the negative self-talk may have both on our body and mind. In this episode, we now move towards the solution part of it. And before I share with you one technique through which we can kind of replace our negative self-talk to a positive one and possibly find a solution. But before we get there, from my own experience as a coach, as a therapist and a trauma healer, when I speak with and coach several of my clients, what I would like to share here is this negative self-talk or its impact on our body and mind, resulting in chronic stress, worry, and various ailments of all kinds. Friends, this does not really come up overnight. So it's not like you have one negative self-talk or a one negative experience which may lead to it. Most of the clients that I've been working with and I've helped them overcome this, they've been suffering on account of this constant negative script written in their brain and mind by themselves over a period of time. By this I mean the stress on our body or in our mind begins to show up when for a very long period of time we do not seek support or do not really adapt the right coping mechanisms to find a way out of these issues and problems. More so in relation to mental health, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. And one of the best ways people would like to hide their shame is by indulging in self-medication or self-diagnosis. That too by the limited knowledge available on the internet. So before I share with you a solution, friends, I also would like to place a request here to seek support. Do not feel ashamed of anything, because just like our body, let's say we have a cold and flu or a fever, I would never feel ashamed to go tell my doctor that I guess I'm running high fever or I have some kind of viral infection. Similarly, I shouldn't feel ashamed of if I have stress overwhelming me and I really need help out. Now moving on, one of the best ways where you could really find a way out of the negative self-talk. I mean, if you've really a habitual chronic worrier, somebody who worries a lot and constantly talks in a negative tone to your own self, Ethan Kross gives us a beautiful technique to actually find a way to reduce this. He calls this distant self-talk. And in his book, Inner Chatter, he gives a very detailed description of it. But what I've done here is that I would like to share with you the same complex technique into a very simple one. So what Ethan explains is that one of the ways where we could reduce this negative inner chatter is by creating a distance. Now you must be wondering, how do we create a distance with our thoughts? So the author here explains that to do 2 to 3 methods. One, is you can actually hire a coach or a therapist, seek their support, because a neutral, non-judgmental, an expert, when you go and tell them this is what your self-talk has been, which has now manifested into a lot of stress, which is overwhelming you, sad, anxious, and you find yourself stuck in life, this support, which can be in form of a therapist, a life coach, a trauma expert, a counselor, or even a psychiatrist. All these are different professions, but wherever you're reaching out, they can provide you a neutral perspective, helping you find that distance from your thoughts. So this is like you're talking to the other person. You share your thoughts, and the other person can ask you some specific questions or help you perspective. This is one of the best ways of creating a distance with your negative talk or your thoughts with your own self. Another way that you could do this is through your own self. If you journal, and if you don't, you can anytime start this wonderful habit of journaling, or simply just putting down your thoughts on paper. So if you have not yet journaled, you can do so right away. And if you're someone who's always been into it, you must be very familiar with the benefits that journaling brings in. So one of the way you can create distance between your own thoughts, the negative thoughts, and your present reality is by simply putting down all your thoughts on paper. When you write and put your thoughts on paper, you will find that the chaos in our mind is way too difficult to really arrive at a conclusion, a solution, and even to understand where it's all getting into. While you put all the mess onto a paper and keep it aside for some time, maybe even for a few seconds, and come back to it and read it, you will realize that there is a lot of clarity. In fact, sometimes it may so happen that while you're even writing itself, you will find answers coming in from within you, then giving you solution to your problems, or just simply an insight where you were actually stuck because you were just going into a web or a cycle or into a circle in your mind. But the moment you put it down on a paper, it's kind of brings so much clarity that you just find yourself through a distance, just looking at it or rereading it, that, okay, here's where I think I'm really getting stuck on, or this is why the reason that I feel so stressed. So another method, as I said, and it's indeed a very powerful one, is to journal or share your thoughts on paper. Finally, the final technique here is to actually imagine yourself when you have a lot of negative self, that the story of your life or all that you've been thinking into a movie, and you need to now use your imaginative power and visualize that you're sitting inside, let's say, a theater or a cinema hall, and you're watching your own movie where you have stepped out of your movie, out of the stories you've been telling yourself, and you are now a spectator. So here in this technique, you're playing a dual role. You have your thought, self-talk, you have all the negative self-talk that you've been telling yourself for a long, long time. But at the same time, you now also become a spectator, an audience to your own thoughts. So you move away from your story. You visualize you are in a cinema hall or a theater where your movie is being played right, and whatever you've been telling yourself is being displayed on the screen. And you step outside and a different you is watching you. And you look at it where you find yourself, okay, is this what I've been telling myself? Does it make sense? But friends, this particular method or technique, this may not be really effective unless you practice it and you've been doing it for a very long time, or you've been taught to do so. You have a support, a friend, or a coach who can help you walk you through this experience. Because some of the way our mind works, it's not necessarily that we may by self can do all of it in an effective way. So I reiterate again here, seek help. Wherever you find, seek help. This way, you could also experience that the results of looking at your own movie from somebody else's eyes, or having assist you look at your movie, and they may even ask you some questions. What do you see in the movie? And maybe something very specific to the problem you're facing. This can give you tremendous insights, which usually does not really happen when we do it everything by our own self. I say this with my own self. I say this with my own personal experience, because many a times in my life when I was suffering from bouts of anxiety, worry, and I was stuck in my life with a lot of stress, I just can't make sense of anything, even though I journal, even though as a coach, I know of the million techniques. It was only through the help of my coach I was able to see the movie in a much clearer way, in a much effective way, and I was then able to tap into my inner wisdom. I was able to gain that insights. And finally, on the various questions that my coach asked me at different junctures of the movie I was watching of my own self, I was able to answer. And while I was even answering, I had my own eureka moments where I was like, oh, now I got it. Right. I was just wondering, and stuff like that. So I just would urge that you can practice it, but with help, this becomes more effective, more powerful, and a brilliant way of problems. Well, that's it for today, friends. I hope you'll try all the 3 techniques, find them useful, practice it, and I hope you do this with help of a coach. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.